Our worldview of materialism and separation has basically told us that this reality, this physical reality, is the only reality. And because it's sort of peripheralized the nature also of mind and consciousness, seeing them as something that arises rather than something that's innate in the nature of reality, it's also taken out all of our experiences that, again, are part of our natural heritage as microcosmic co-creators of a living and evolutionary multidimensional universe, which exists and evolves as a unified entity, which knows itself from the very get-go, 13.8 billion years ago. So we have access as self-aware beings. We have access to supernormal attributes that are natural to us: telepathy, remote viewing, precognition, and perhaps the most fundamental, our superpower of intuition.
You're listening to Catalyst Talks, conversations with change agents, outliers, superheroes, and truly conscious leaders modeling what it is to be an unstoppable force for good and truth in this world. What lit these catalysts on fire to do their work, and what nuggets of wisdom can they share with a world literally on fire? I'm your host, Stephanie Trager. I'm a transformational catalyst and life coach to maverick change agents in business, leadership, and life. On this podcast, I wear an eclectic mix of hats, including Earthkeeper, Wayfinder, Truth Teller, coach, lawyer, business, and impact strategist. My intention is holding space for higher purpose, peak wellness, soul mastery, and deeper impact so we can live in harmony with ourselves, each other, and nature. Please subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen. If you love it, please share and spread the word. We're on YouTube and all the podcast platforms. See the show notes on catalysttalks.com for links, and enjoy this episode. Welcome. My guest today is Jude Currivan, a cosmologist, futurist, planetary healer, author, member of the Evolutionary Leaders Circle, and previously a senior international businesswoman. Jude has a master's degree in physics from Oxford University, specializing in quantum physics and cosmology, and a doctorate in archaeology, researching ancient cosmologies. She's traveled to over 80 countries, worked with wisdom keepers from many traditions, and is a lifelong researcher into the nature of reality. My soulmate. Jude has authored 7 books, including the award-winning and best-selling The Cosmic Hologram. So good. And recently, this year in 2022, published The Story of Gaia, which is amazing. She is the co-founder of WholeWorld-View, and you are going to love this episode. I'm so excited to share this with you. Please share this with everybody you know. Plus share it on your platforms. This helps me. This helps Jude. This helps them. This helps the world. So I am thanking you in advance for doing that. You can find all the links to the show notes and to reach out to Jude. And you can find all the links that we mentioned, including to her books and other things that we mentioned in the show at catalysttalks.com. And before we get started, I want to invite you to check out the Liberation Masterclass. This is a masterclass that I had shared a few months ago. It's a deep dive into owning your power as a creator. And it's a wonderful way to ground this conversation into practical application in your own life. And you can find that at stephanietrager.com/liberation. It is a free masterclass. Liberation, Owning Your Power as a Creator. And again, it's at stephanietrager.com/liberation. The link will also be in the show notes. Okay, now let's get started. I am beyond the cosmos, honored and excited for this conversation. Welcome, Jude.
It's great to be with you, Stephanie. Even though it's very, very cold where you are, I hope this conversation will warm you up and everyone that's enjoying it with us to warm up.
Yes, indeed, it will. I'm positive. And I'm going to share a quote actually from Carl Sagan, even though there's more than a trillion quotes in your books, but this one just popped in front of me. And I was like, wow, this really sums up your 2 books for me in a very simple way. And, you know, it's almost like he took this quote from the non-localized information, you know, that was available to him back then, that then became actualized through your wisdom and your work. So it says, the cosmos is within us. We are a way for the universe to know itself. The nitrogen in our DNA, the calcium in our teeth, the iron in our blood, carbon in our apple pies. We were made in the interiors of collapsing stars. We are made of star stuff. And I mean, I think you say it better. So Let's drop in. I want to start with a really unusual prompt. And it's a contemplation of mine that, like an inquiry that landed on me once years ago when I was sitting by an alpine lake in the Cascade Mountains in Oregon. And I'd love to hear how this lands for you and an answer to this contemplation. What if there were galaxies hidden in the twinkling light of sunshine on the waves?
I love that. And you know why I love it so much? Because it reminds me of a wonderful quote by a British visionary, yes, Blake. And William Blake wrote something similar. He said, to see the whole world in the palm of your hand, to see the universe in a grain, to realize that the entirety, the wholeness of reality is expressed in every minute aspect of it. And their perspectives were, of course, intuitive. Certainly Blake's was. He wrote hundreds of years ago. And yet now we are discovering that our entire universe is manifested as what I describe as a cosmic hologram. Now, the point about a hologram is the whole is in every part, and every part comes together to form a whole. So it's both ancient understanding, ancient wisdom. The ancient Indian teachers described reality in a similar way. William Blake did hundreds of years ago. And now here we are with all of our technologies and looking out as far as we can and as small and as large as we can, realizing this same thing, that the universe is indeed within us and we are microcosms of our universe's innate living intelligence. So what an amazing time now where all of these perspectives are coming together.
So someone listening who does not have a scientific mind, who is like, I want to save the world, right? I want to have a lot of impact. And I'm also somebody who's committed to my personal growth, right? Mm-hmm. And I feel that I love this word hologram. I use it all the time. Your book, The Cosmic Hologram, is such an incredible, I was like, oh my God, could you have a glossary of this? There's so many juicy phrases in there. And so, but yet still, the way you describe it, how could you describe this for somebody to really understand and anchor into their daily life, the idea, the notion of a holographic reality?
Well, even going beyond a holographic reality, that's just a way of showing us how the infinite and eternal mind of the cosmos creates perfect universes. So we can go down that route of the science and the hologram and all of that's showing. But essentially, two things are coming out of all the evidence, all the scientific breakthroughs that are now happening, and they're happening at all scales of experience and existence and across many, many, many different fields of research. The key points they're showing us is that our universe exists and evolves as a unified entity. Therefore, separation is an illusion. We are inseparable. We're inseparable from each other, our planetary home, our entire universe. So whether we know the science of that or not, whether we can point to all of the peer-reviewed research papers that back this up, this is the bottom line. This is where the rubber hits the road, because we bought into this illusion of separation. And of course, that worldview, a worldview of separation, has driven a world of suffering. As we can remember, as we can literally wake up and remember we're inseparable, my goodness me, what vistas, what adventures, what evolutionary opportunities that offers. And that doesn't need any science to get it. That, I think, is a really key point. The other key point I'd say, and again, this is what, all the evidence is showing, is that, the old paradigm of separation has also given us a worldview that says that somehow, after billions of years of our universe, consciousness has arisen somehow through random mutations and all the rest of it into a consciousness. This is now being completely turned on its head too. So instead of that, the evidence is showing us that mind and consciousness aren't something we have. They are literally what we and the whole world are. And that, again, can be an experiential aha, rather than, oh, point to all the signs, because I can show people the signs till the, as we say we say here in the UK, until the cows come home. Mm-hmm. But the reality of it is, and you pointed this out, Stephanie, when people go on their own inner journey, they're already beginning to realize and remember these two fundamental truths of the nature of reality. What the science is now doing is backing that up, is underpinning and framing that. And you and I can go as deep into the science as we would like to today. But ultimately, if anyone says, okay, I just have a thing about science, it's tough on me. I go, I understand that. And it's like, you don't need to know how an engine works to drive a car. You just need to know that the wheels aren't going to drop off and you're heading in the right direction. And what this is all showing us is that the direction of travel is to a remembering of these fundamental truths about the nature of reality. And so us and our place in a living and evolving universe.
All right. We're going to break that down one by one, because that's my little outline here for us to cover today right there. But so one of the things that stood out, and it reminds me in the cosmic hologram where you talk about supernormal, right? So you don't need to know how the engine works, yet what happens when you bump up against the resistance? What is the resistance in the hologram? Let me first ask you that. What is the resistance in the hologram that shows up as detractors, possibly, right? People who push back on the evolution, the impulse.
It's an interesting point, actually, because there's far, far, far less pushback now than there would have been 5-10 years ago. Mm-hmm. I think the direction of travel is so powerful that, people are getting it in an experiential way, but also the evidence is so compelling. And, not necessarily the evidence changes minds, emotions change how we think, but nonetheless, the evidence is so compelling that it invites us into this expanded awareness of who we are. So rather than pushback, I'm finding people are more and more eager to understand this. And as you say, from that, what does it mean in their own lives? Because you mentioned the term supernormal. And I write about this in the Cosmic Hologram, and I'll write about it again in my next book, After the Story of Gaia. But our worldview of materialism and separation has basically told us that this reality, this physical reality, is the only reality. And because it's sort of peripheralized the nature also of mind and consciousness, seeing them as something that arises rather than something that's innate in the nature of reality, it's also taken out all of our experiences that, again, are part of our natural heritage as microcosmic co-creators of a living and evolutionary multidimensional universe, which exists and evolves as a unified entity, which knows itself from the very get-go, 13.8 billion years ago. So we have access as self-aware beings. We have access to supernormal attributes that are natural to us: telepathy, remote viewing, precognition, and perhaps the most fundamental, our superpower of intuition. Mm. And because the old paradigm, which is dying now, because it cannot encompass the new evidence, this is the point around scientific development. You have to follow the evidence. And what you do is you have the evidence, and then you form a sort of theoretical framework. But if the evidence goes beyond the ability of that framework to explain what's happening, then you ditch the framework and you follow the evidence. And that's where we are at now. The old paradigm of materialism and separation is insufficient to cope with the compelling evidence. This new paradigm, this emergent paradigm of a living, evolving, essentially conscious, multidimensional universe, brings everything then back in, because it naturalizes those supernormal phenomena and attributes. It naturalizes our abilities, which as a human species we've done since time immemorial, to engage with and communicate with other realms of consciousness that have been peripheralized and denigrated and, for so long. This now brings them back into a natural way of being, a richer experience of what it means to be human, what it means to be a spiritual being, having a physical experience, having a human earth walk. So this is literally, this is a massive transformational game changer, it seems to me, between how we have perceived ourselves and the world around us in a very limited, a very constrained way. And now opening up into this, what is an ancient, but also now an emergent, leading edge understanding of a much more fundamental nature of reality.
And as it flips that on its as it flips the old on its head, all the systems that we, systems in modernized worlds and the systems that everyone has agreed with are based on the old paradigm. So how do you see this emergent truth? How do you see that flip? The integration.
Well, it's a very interesting point, actually, because as a systems researcher, as well as much else, I realized that when a current system's unsustainable, when it's reached its limits of possibility, it literally breaks down because it cannot hold. The center cannot hold, and it starts to break down. But as part of our planetary homes, Gaia's evolutionary arc for over 4 billion years, there have been many times where that's happened. And yet when that has happened, there's been an incredible combination of meaningful information, patterned information, guided information, part of the evolutionary impulse of our entire universe, that incredibly quickly has transformed a breakdown into a breakthrough. And on we go until that next level of arc from simplicity to complexity. So first of all, this is not necessarily a slow, iterative process. A time comes where enough is enough, as it were, and the system cannot hold. And I feel that's where we are now. Secondly, when that happens in evolutionary progression, there's almost like something waiting in the wings. There's like this higher level awareness of complexity that's waiting there, that's potentizing, that's potentializing. And as the old breaks down, if there's sufficient essence, sufficient energy in that emergent new, then it just takes off incredibly quickly. The third thing is that it seems to me that, we now know, each of us know, that how we are living, how we have been, was not normal, is not sustainable. And I think the last few years especially has brought that home to us in so many ways. So as you say, so many more people now are already on their inner journey of discovery. This actually says, yay, this is our way home. This is our way forward. This is our potential for conscious evolution. And it gives us a broader scheme to do that. But the other thing you made point about the structures, everything is happening as part of this multi-level tide of change. So the structures themselves are breaking down. From those that we can take the best of and move forward with, may sustain, may be able to regenerate, but others are coming forward, other ways of being, other ways of linking up and lifting up together are already starting to sprout and to grow and to flourish. And at the moment, they're doing so with very little support from example, mainstream media. And yet they're happening. And more often than not, they'll happen regardless. So I just feel we're having this conversation today. There are millions of conversations along these lines happening.
Yeah.
So let's find each other. Let's link up and lift up together and just sing the better song of what is emerging.
Yeah. I feel called to bring this in because my 7-year-old nephew was reading, I think, a Harry Potter book, and it was all about the mythical cauldron of telepathy and all this, right? And he was, and I said, "You have telepathy. I have telepathy." He said, "No, we don't. Show me. What am I thinking?" And so, how do you answer that? A 7-year-old who doesn't have belief. How do you answer that?
I don't think you try and prove them wrong. I think you invite them into a possibility. And I think that's whether they're 7-year-old or 17-year-old or 47-year-old or 70-year-old. And all of this is an invitation.
Yeah.
And, many children would not have responded in that way. Many children I know would have responded with, yes, of course. Yeah. And I think for that age, it's making a game. It's being joyful and making games of this.
Yeah.
And sort of inviting young people to begin to trust their intuition. It doesn't have to be telepathy. Telepathy can be quite nuanced, but we know when we have a gut feeling, we know when our, intuition's speaking to us. So I would just invite anyone who's faced with a child in that perspective, rather than try and go to the sort of the 60-mile-an-hour version, which is intuition, go at the step-by-step, which is intuition. If there's a decision to be made, invite them. What do you feel about this? What are you sensing about this? And it's an invitation to a journey that's a journey of many steps.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And I was, I would love for you to actually drop into the technical for a minute here around the information. Like this for me, the way you frame this unlocked something incredible in me. And like I can see in the invisible information. And, so can you explain this a little bit around accessing these supernormal powers that we have, who we are? And where does information come in there?
I'll be delighted to. Well, we now know, and we won't have time to go into the evidence for it, but we do have evidence across many scales that the appearance of our universe, its energy and matter and its space-time, is not its fundamental reality, but that its appearance emerges from deeper levels of non-physical causation. And it does so, as you say, as meaningful in hyphen formation that then manifests itself as the entirety of our universe at every scale within its wholeness. The point around information is that if we take a step even before that and go to this realization of the cosmos as an infinite and eternal cosmic mind, essentially, we might call God, we might call Allah, we might call great mystery. Albert Einstein called cosmic mind. But the point of cosmic mind as the ground of all being, the infinite and eternal ground of all being, is then how does our universe, what we experience of our universe, how does that emerge? How does that arise? And the best understanding we now have is that cosmic mind articulates its intelligence as digitized information. Now, our English language has 26 letters, A, B, C, and onwards. Of themselves, none of those letters have any meaning. But when we bring them together in words and sentences, in poetry and song and books, we give meaning. When we're having our conversation, I'm speaking, my words through our technologies are being translated into long columns of digitized information, ones and zeros of digitized information. We then squirt them down a cable via a satellite, bouncing back into your home and your computer, where they are retranslated from those columns of ones and zeros into meaningful words, and vice versa. And we do it with sound, and we do it with images. Our universe does something very similar, but our universe, instead of an English language to offer meaning, just uses this universal language of two letters, ones and zeros. So what we have in our universe is cosmic mind expressing this causation that becomes all that we experience in our universe as digitized, meaningful information. And that meaningful information, this is where the cosmic hologram comes in, is actually held on the two-dimensional boundary of what appears to be space-time, and then holographically projected as the appearance of everything from atoms to planets to plants to people. It doesn't mean reality is less real, but it's the most incredible, perfect way, optimal way, effective way within which cosmic mind can create a universe as a great thought rather than great thing. And we are its microcosmic co-creators.
So then the intellectual mind who is on their evolutionary journey, who has been programmed with intellectual meaning making processes and, conceptual frameworks, how does this land into someone who's problem solving for a problem in our third dimensional world and in nature? Let's just take this notion of, and I would actually love to hear you speak about climate change, right? There's so many ways this is being projected right now, but someone's saying, I want to fight climate change or work on this issue of climate change. That itself has many holograms, but how, I'll pause there. I think you know what I'm saying.
I think the crucial point here, the vital point is, what is our relationship with our planetary home? Because the old paradigm of materialism and separation, you said, we've had this for a long time. And this is really a very mechanistic worldview, that even when 100 years ago, the pioneers of quantum physics and relativity physics came along and said, the universe is not mechanistic. It's much more interpenetrable and interdependent and whole. That view, as a projected perception by scientists, was pushed to the side. And the whole push then became one of technology. But in a sense, the technology that quantum physics and relativistic physics enabled still then became founded on a mechanistic worldview. So our structures, as we were saying earlier, also continue to embody that mechanistic perception. So what we now have is a situation where our paradigm of materialism and separation has meant that our relationship with each other, with our planetary home Gaia, with the whole world, has been one of materialism and separation. This is a huge issue, as we know, because climate change is primarily, and not just climate change, the loss of biodiversity, the pollution, the extraction, all of the maladies, all of the interconnecting maladies, diseases, imbalances that afflict our planetary home really emanate from our afflicted worldview. The disease of separation that we're now waking up to realize is an illusion. So when we wake up to realize we're inseparable, we're not just inseparable from each other, we're inseparable from our planetary home. When we realize that mind and consciousness aren't what we have, they're literally what we and the whole world are, we're in relationship with a living unconscious universe and a living unconscious planetary home, Gaia. When we also wake up to realize that our universe doesn't just meaningfully exist, but it purposefully evolves from simplicity to ever greater levels of complexity and self-awareness and individuation and collective interdependence. We wake up to be able to heal our relationships with each other, Gaia, and the whole world. So when we talk about climate, all that we have brought ourselves to in this essential crisis is also an existential opportunity and potential if we can wake up to realize this new perspective, not just understand it, but to experience it and embodying it. A friend of mine, Michael Linfield, taught me the term Gaian.
I love that.
I love it too. So when I wrote the story of Gaia, or the story of Gaia wrote me, what began with the whole arc of our evolutionary story ended with an invitation to consider ourselves as Gaians. And when we live as Gaians, rather than living as humans, as Michael tells us, we don't live apart from our planet. Our planet lives within us. We live within Gaia. We are in profound, loving, honoring, reciprocal relationship. And then our approach to climate change is not one of fighting or conflict or anger. It's one of healing a relationship into a harmonious way of becoming co-evolutionary partners and co-evolve together.
Mm. Yeah. I think most your story, and I'd love for you to share a little bit about how you came to the information, but also how most people that I speak to that have this understanding of what you're saying, whether we can articulate it as gorgeously or not, but we had an experience. We saw, we connected, we were connected, we experienced that unity and that multidimensional aspect of ourselves. And so do you think that everyone will need to experience that, or that is just that evolutionary impulse is going to cause that to happen? Do you think that people need to experience that? Because a lot of folks are coming in. I see there's this opportunity to share the information and say, here's the science here. And so, like you said, you have to have this lived experience. Is the gateway the learning, the knowledge, before it becomes an experiential?
I think I've just completed a 16-module course for Humanities Team. And one part of that course is called Sage, Shaman, and Seer. The reason I wrote about that or expressed that and are presenting that is that when I look back, there are three ways that traditions have had over millennia of that journey of discovery, that inner and outer discovery. And that's the way of understanding, which is the way of the mind, which is the way of the sage. And the ancient Greeks were amazing at this. And many others. The Chinese tradition is very powerful within this. It's an understanding. The way of the shaman is more the experiential perspective, and indigenous traditions and indigenous communities still uphold this wisdom. The web of life, the interdependency of all life. It's very much a felt, experiential way to that in-depth perception. And the way of the seer is the way of revelation. It's often the way, oh my goodness, I didn't sign up for this, but here we are. That sort of revelation. But it's that way of mysticism and revelation that sees deep within the nature of reality. And so the traditions tend to emphasize one of those three paths. What I'm suggesting now is that we are able to journey along all three paths. And by integrating understanding, experiencing, and revelatory insight, head, heart, and hands, sage, shaman, and seer, we can actually bring ourselves to this integrated perception of wholeness, of unity, of oneness. And for each of us, that may begin in a different way. It could begin as an experience, so shamanic path, or a revelatory insight, the way of the seer, and then move into one or two of the other paths. But ultimately, that confluence of all three paths is what I feel the evolutionary impulse of our entire universe is calling us to embody, to understand, to experience, and to embody, because I do feel we're on the threshold potentially of a conscious evolution of our entire species.
Yeah. So how it's interesting because like these multidimensional archetypes that I've heard you say this, so I'm just going to grab this phrase. You said like, how might we normalize multidimensional archetypes? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, and I was brought up. I don't use the word normalize anymore because a dear friend said, no, naturalize, Jude. Use the word
Love.
naturalize.
Yeah.
So I was duly upbraided on that one. But absolutely, because, all the evidence, of course, again, this is replete throughout ancient traditions and universal wisdom teachings, that the reality of our universe is multidimensional. And therefore we have, and because our universe does exist and evolve as a non-locally unified entity, we do have naturally access to those multidimensional levels of sentience. And all my life, well, since I was the age of 4, I've walked between worlds. I've been able to have the privilege of engaging and experience so many of those levels and wondrous beings and deep, deep wisdom. So for me, my whole life's been a learning process of curiosity and learning and deepening that perception. This is natural for all of us. Mm-hmm. And again, it may be that for some of us, as a gardener, I love growing vegetables and I am guided by the devas and elemental realms every year, and I learn from them every year. I know many other folks who have learned profound wisdom from angelic realms. As a cosmologist, but also speaking to many astrologer friends, they are using their ability to naturalize their communications with the consciousness of our entire solar system, to understand at a deeper level that interdependent consciousness dynamic matrix that astrology teaches us. So the more we can naturalize in whatever way calls to us, it's such an exciting adventure, and it's so profoundly rewarding and benevolent. And it seems to me, going back to climate change, is when we do that with our planetary home Gaia and her sentience, whether it's with trees or with animals or whether it's with the elements, however it may be, because her entirety is sentient, then we can learn from her. And she is our primordial mother, and she is the wisest mother I know. So she can help us, it seems to me, to resolve many of the afflictions that we have caused her, and hopefully restore and regenerate to the greatest degree we possibly can.
So how do you see like the emergence of greater complexity? I love everyone. I will share your books because my mind is just blown on the science, and I'm not a scientist at all, but just even my head wrapping around that from simplicity to complexity, how might the greater, I hear you're speaking about how that greater complexity will serve us. And then there's how are the ways it's showing up that complexity is actually detrimental or has been used in detrimental ways.
Well, I don't think complexity is detrimental in that sense. I do feel, though, that as humans, we complicate. And complication and complexity are two very different things.
Yes.
Okay. So the universe has undertaken a 13.8 billion year journey from simplicity to great levels of complexity. But what that means is greater levels of individuated self-expression, realized and collective interdependence. Progressively, hopefully for us, this deeper sense of interbeing with the whole world. So this journey is one of growth, of evolution, of awareness, of maturity in that sense, as a species, as a planetary home, as an entire universe. So we are part of that impulse, whether aware of it or not. The only difference, it seems to me, is whether we are able to wake up and remember we're inseparable, remember the deeper truths of what we're sharing, and come together and link up and lift up, because that whole journey from simplicity to complexity has been based on innate collaborative relationships. Everything in our universe is in relationship with everything else. Now, sometimes those relationships can be resonant. Sometimes they can be dissonant. Sometimes they can be, competitive. But the whole journey to complexity is always characterized by increased levels of cooperation.
Mm.
And that's where we are now, because in Gaia's story, her biological children have gone from being single celled without nuclei to ingesting and creating a symbiosis of bacteria that became the nuclei of our cells and enabled greater complexity. They then came together to form multi-celled, again, cooperatively. We are, each of us, a community of 37 trillion cells, coherent, distributed intelligence, meaningfully informed. Yep. As a community, and not all of in fact, the majority of our cells are not human. Many are fungi, bacterial, viral. The reality of it is we are a cooperative community. So as we then, as a human species that is naturally a social species, more and more, we have cooperated. We wouldn't be here now if we hadn't have taken major, major leaps of cooperation. But there's residual fear in our society, in our collective psyche, it seems to me. There's this residual dis-ease of perceived separation, for which fear and loneliness and anger and all the other are natural behaviors. But as we remember our unity in diversity, as we remember our unity in belonging, it seems to me that we're being invited to come together, to link up and lift up and level up and light up in this incredible opportunity to cooperate as a planetary species and to cooperate with our planetary home Gaia and all her children.
Mm. Wow. And how can you explain attractors in that? Because that to me is such a, like, if I'm speaking to somebody who, like, as if you're speaking to somebody who does not have that kind of inner, they might hear and get the knowledge and it makes sense, but haven't yet. How does the attractor piece support?
Okay, well, let's go back then to the appearance of our universe, the energy, matter, space, time, arising from deeper levels of meaningful information, causation. And of course, information is the basic stuff. It expresses itself in complementary ways then as energy, matter, and in another way as space, time. So underlying all of those systems that form our universe at all scales of existence, from the tiniest to the whole, are what's called attractors. And the information that's actually embodied, and by embodied, I'm not talking about physical embodiment here. I'm talking about this realm, these levels, these non-physical levels of causation, but is actually held within the attractor, is a vast amount of informational points, and they're in dynamic relationship with each other. So when we talk about an ecosystem, underlying an ecosystem are many, many, many different attractors. But the same patterns that we see within an ecosystem, we also see in the internet. We see in the nodes, the backbone, the URLs, all the factors of the internet replicate that of a biological ecosystem, and underlying the internet is also an attractor basin, as it's called, of information. All of this is about consciousness. I'll give you one more example before I'll bring it all together and hopefully tie a red bow on it. When we look at earthquakes, the phenomenon of earthquakes, we find that there's no such thing as an average earthquake. When we plot hundreds of earthquakes on a graph, on one axis, the destructive power of earthquakes, on the other axis, the frequency of earthquakes, we find a slope, a straight line, linking all those earthquakes and showing that there's no such thing as an average earthquake. The only relationship is that an earthquake that's twice the destructive power is 4 times less likely to happen. That's it. Now, when analysis has been done on human conflicts, again, looking at the destructive power, in terms of fatalities, human fatalities, and their frequency, again, you find the same relationship, a straight line, saying that the only relationship between human conflicts is that as for earthquakes. In other words, a conflict that's twice as destructive in terms, in this case, of human deaths is around, it's not quite the same slope, but around 4 times less likely to happen. And this covers conflicts from world wars to insurgencies in Iraq and Afghanistan. So we now have 2 things. We have a so-called natural world reflecting the same patterns as our human-made world. And we're finding that both are based on attractor basins. And those attractor basins are essentially attractors of consciousness. In terms of the internet, in terms of human conflicts, those attractors recognize our ability to come together to create something. Yeah. In the internet, it's a world wide web and all that goes with that. But our consciousness then brings into that internet our level of awareness. Is it love or fear? Is it separation or unity? Similarly, conflicts, human conflicts, are the outcome of a collective human awareness based on a worldview of separation. Where conflicts, inequalities, all those behaviors are natural outcomes of a consciousness and awareness of separation. So if we can bring into manifestation those phenomena based on that level of awareness, by increasing our level of awareness, by expanding our level of awareness, by evolving our level of awareness, by waking up to remember who we really are and who we can consciously become, instead of an outcome of conflicts, the natural outcome of what we're speaking to here is peace. That's the point. And all of these come from attractors of collective awareness.
Wow. So that is well. The way you articulate that is a thought that I have. Like I would say, how do you reconcile? I'll often have conversations where I don't articulate it that way. That though, say you're working to solve the conflict within that separation pattern, within that separation paradigm. It's just going to continue. It's the appearance of some impact, of some change. How do you reconcile that impulse and with the awareness of, I don't know if reconcile is the right word, but explain to somebody who says, yeah, but then it's selfish if I'm going to come over here and focus on my evolution and my growth. And so I can understand what you're saying, right? Because in order to really, really embody what you're saying physically and spiritually, it is that process of evolutionary growth. It could be quantum or long or short, and so it's the unraveling of that old. So how do you say, well, how do you say, you just said it. I would say, how do you know this is what our souls came here to do, to evolve, versus let's go and work within the matrix to undo this and create more of it as an unintended consequence. Do you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely, I do. Absolutely, I do. And I would say it's not an either or. It's an invite and an and. When the cosmic hologram came out, we co-founded something called WholeWorld-View, and our aim is to serve the understanding, experiencing, and embodying of unitive awareness. And we talk about acting local, feeling global, and thinking cosmic. So what this is doing, what this new understanding is doing, is offering us an invitation into the wholeness of reality. But we don't have to do that without, as a main focus of our lives, because ultimately its key teaching is the golden rule. Treat others as you, and our planetary home as you wish to be treated. You don't have to read books to do that. You don't have to sort of have a degree in science to do that. All it seems to me is you have to do is show up and perhaps perceive the humanity and that, in everybody, and not just in everybody and the humanity, but the wholeness of life and love. And you know, as someone who's worked in this way for many, many years, keep it simple. You know, if I come across a conflict, I don't try and solve it. I try and hear it. I try and hear and understand why it's there. And I seek to invite whoever's involved with it to share their story, to share their stories, and perhaps invite, and it can take a long time. But it's how do we nurture empathy? How do we nurture ways of seeing each other, not as other, but as diverse expressions of the one wholeness, as you know, as family, as relations. And so all that I write about and bring forward really is a science of love. It's as simple as that.
It is.
And it really is simple. And I know, very, very well know, that with the journey we've been on for a long time, it's not necessarily easy, because that trauma, that all that goes with that dis-ease and misperception and illusion of separation, we have a major healing process to undertake as a human species to give us the ability to be free to then really step into this incredible invitation to consciously evolve. But I don't think it's an either or. I think it's a dance. The more we work to heal ourselves and our perception of the world, the more we can serve that healing in the world.
And that's a holographic imprint in itself, right?
It sure is. It sure is.
I'd love to ask you if you have any, blips off of this awareness, this great truth of awareness. Do you have ever any of those old human moments of the, other energies getting in, or do you know what I'm saying? Do you ever veer off and have to remind yourself, what does it look like in a day of the life of you?
How long have you got?
Okay.
How long have you got? I would say now, very rarely, but I'm talking about 66 years of this journey. Yeah. And many times of falling over, many times of scraping my knees, metaphorically and really. For many years, my heart was shut down. I had my first discarnate experience when I was 4 years old. But my dad, very young, my dad was a coal miner, and he died in his early 30s when I was 10. My brother was 7. My mother, needed to bring us up, and she was the most amazing mother. But that hurt, that loss hurt. And then I had a number of other losses, terrible choice of boyfriends, terrible choice of a couple of husbands. And I just kept going round and round and round in a way that, I took, what I thought I was doing was taking refuge in my head. But what I was doing is I was imprisoning myself. I was literally shutting my heart down. I was imprisoning myself. And it took me a long time. It took me a long time, and well into my 40s, to find a way through and to essentially be healed of those emotional traumas. And, that was quite a long time ago. I'm 70 years now. I've been very, very happily married for the last 20 years, but I could not have been in that relationship with my beloved husband had I not got to a point of that level of healing. And there's always a journey to continue. So it's not about, making perfect the enemy of good at all, or good the enemy of perfect, whichever it may be. But the point is, it is an ongoing journey. But when we are given, as I was many times and ignored it many times, an opportunity to look deeper and say, I need to deal with this, I ignored it. And it came a time when I couldn't ignore it anymore. And that literally broke me open. And when it broke me open, it was as though it was a new birth. It was like, I was like a little chick inside an egg, and the egg broke open and out I came. And that journey ever since has been one of incredible joy. But it took a long time to get there. And I would say now, more than perhaps ever, our collective, our whole species had access to healing opportunities. There are so many ways in which we can find our way, and often and greatly helped by others, to find our way home.
Mm-hmm. I so appreciate that. Thank you for sharing. It's just, it's relatable. It's people, we hear the wisdom, and it's just such a reminder to everybody that this is a journey, and we're all on the journey, and it's ongoing, and it shows up in all of our diverse ways. And yeah, I so appreciate that. I think it's in that evolutionary discomfort that so much more magic comes, and that's the invitation.
It is. And, the whole evolutionary arc of our universe has been one of challenge, and then overcoming, and more challenge and overcoming and growing. It's the most extraordinary story. I mean, I when I came to the end of writing the story of Gaia, and I always say, the book wrote me, my reverence for our planetary mother was profound before even beginning the book. But when I literally understood the entirety of that incredible journey of purpose and never giving up, it's just the most incredible story. It really, really is. And so for us now, here and now, we stand on the bow wave of our universe's evolutionary impulse, the next step potentially for our planetary home. I just invite people to really understand the privilege of our being human beings, Gaians, at this moment in time, and what we can do together and with our planetary home and the entire universe if we make our collective moment of choice, our personal and collective moment of choice now, to wake up from this illusion of separation, to remember who we really are.
I love that. Thank you. I'm wondering if your third book will be, or let me just plant the seed. I would love to hear your vision for a world in 100 years, like having actualized all of these, possibilities, our greatest potentials. I would love to hear what does it even look like? I think that's the opportunity now, as we start like seeding what that looks like, because it's hard to know if, you don't know. So, yeah. That's
exactly the third book.
Oh, okay.
I'm not suggesting that I'm going to look 100 years ahead. I'm not. But what I'm going to be, I hope and trust, if I'm honored enough to write it, is where are we? Who are we? Who are we? And where are we now? And why here? Why now? Why us? And what is our potential and possibility? And I'm not going to see 100 years ahead. I don't know anyone, actually, when I've looked back over thousands of years, the universe has got such a grander vision. Gaia's got such a grander vision and I don't want to limit it. But what I hope, write about is our potential to choose and to imagine and to co-create together. That's what I hope and trust and pray that the third book offers me the opportunity to share with everyone.
Wow. I pray and hope I have the opportunity to read that as it chooses to come through you. So, Jude, I want to honor your time and just thank you so much. Is there any last wisdom nugget that, if you tune into the listeners in all space and time, whenever this lands in their earbuds or whatever they're using, that would touch the heart? Just one more, if there's anything else that you feel like sharing.
Oh, my goodness. I would come back to love. What has guided me, and my mum was just incredible in this inspiration. What has guided me in my life, however challenging it's been, is to ask myself, what would love do? What would love do? Not what my head tells me, not what I think I should do, but what would love do? And, the journey has been extraordinary. And I'm so grateful for every step of the way, however difficult, however challenging, because it's brought me to this place. It's brought us here and now. And I'm very, very grateful.
So grateful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And we will share all the ways that everyone can find you and links to everything you mentioned, including your course and your books and your Worldview website. And yeah, thank you. This is amazing. And everyone who's listening, share this with your networks. This needs to be this. Shouldn't say needs. I'm so careful of my words now, right? Informing the universe. This will be touching the hearts of millions. So thank you, Jude.
Thank you, Stephanie. And yes, it is. And yes, it will reach whoever, however, can really resonate with its love, because that's what it's all about. So thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Catalyst Talks. Stay tuned for what's up next, and please subscribe to our podcast and rate us wherever you listen. You'll find these all at catalysttalks.com. Join the conversation on social media, and if you'd like to reach out, please send me, Stephanie, a private message through stephanietrager.com. Your attention means the world to me. Thank you, thank you, thank you.